Thank you, Kingsley. I want to assure Kingsley that any Labour councillor that is prepared to fight the cuts, then this organisation will stand full square behind them and support them in their actions. Suzanne?
Right. I think it's good always to get these cuts that we're being threatened with into a context. When we're told that there is no alternative to these cuts, we have to remember that there is every year, year on year, there is £25 billion a year lost to the Treasury through tax avoidance. There's 70 billion in tax evasion, and there's 26 billion in uncollected tax. And you think about the services that are closing down for the matter of a few, tens of thousands of pounds. It really puts all of that in context, never mind what you could do if you just tax the corporations a bit more heavily. And of course all of this tax avoidance, tax evasion is done by the wealthy. It's not the poor people who are on the benefits and who are on low wages that are actually able to go to their lawyers and get sort of advice on tax evasion. I just wanted to speak a little bit about housing, because at the minute there are nearly 2 million families who are, which I think represents around 5 million people, who are actually on council housing waiting lists. And of course, to be on a waiting list means that you are homeless or near to homeless or living in overcrowded or unsuitable conditions, which really we shouldn't be seeing in Britain. We shouldn't be seeing those kind of conditions in an advanced economy like Britain's economy. And we've seen the reports today in the press around that there are 1.6 million families who are officially living in poverty. And these are the people that are cabinet of millionaires, the Clegg, Cameron, Osborne. These are millionaires who are telling these families who are on the council housing waiting list, who are living in desperate poverty, that they're the ones who should actually be tightening their belts, not the people who are tax avoiding and tax evading and just not having their tax collected. And incidentally, there have been around 25,000 jobs lost in the revenue service, from the revenue service in tax collection. So actually the focus is not on bringing the money in from the rich, it is actually on squeezing it out and squeezing out any support services to the very poorest, the people who haven't even got decent homes, which then obviously goes on to impact on children's health, on their schooling, on every other aspect of their life and their future prospects. In terms of housing, there is obviously lots that the government could do. It could actually be investing in building housing, social housing, which would then obviously bring in, create a lot of new jobs, which are desperately needed at the minute. But they could also refuse to evict council tenants who can't pay the rent, who are unable to meet the cost of their rent. And they can use legal powers to threaten compulsory purchase orders for any private landlords, against any private landlords who evicts their tenants because their council housing or the council housing benefit has been cut. And one of the other things that we would call on is that instead of having housing benefit caps, actually what we should be looking at is rent caps, in keeping rents affordable within the country so that all of these desperate families can actually get into decent housing. So there's plenty that Labour councils could actually be doing to support people to stay in decent housing and to build and create social housing, which would have a knock-on effect for the economies and the regeneration of communities as well. So it has a much bigger impact. So just along with all the others, I would say that Labour councils really need to give consideration as to how they're actually going to support people, rather than planning how they're actually going to attack them and just squeeze them into greater and greater levels of poverty.
Okay, we're going to open up into questions in just a minute, but Paul is just going to explain a bit about the youth campaign from Youth Fight for Jobs.
I think that these cuts are having a disproportionate effect on young people. We've recently seen new figures come out that say that youth unemployment is up around the 1 million mark at the moment. We've seen the absolutely brutal attacks on the right to an education, with the cap on fees going up to £9,000 a year, and the cuts to May, which will really mean that education will be thrown back to the Victorian era, and it will become a privilege for the very wealthiest in society only. And what we're planning in Youth Fight for Jobs is this all coincides with the 75th anniversary of the Jarrow March, And we're going to do that march again, hopefully going down through different towns and cities. We'll have massive protests of young people. Young people have already shown over the last few months that we are ready to fight for our future. We've seen a massive education movement amongst students. And you know, if Labour councils did come, you know, the cuts that are being passed on to Labour councils are only going to make this situation a hell of a lot worse. And if Labour councils did come out, as you say, set a needs budget, then young people would rally to those Labour councils and back those Labour councillors to the hill. But if they don't do that, then they should expect a massive campaign against them, asking them to step aside and be replaced with people who are ready to fight.